Africa has been the provider. If you look at Europe, Europe cannot survive without Africa. One situation that people don't realize, post-World War, when the US came up with the Marshall Plan, what they don't tell you is that the contribution through exploitation of African minerals was actually the biggest funder of the European Recovery Plan, ERP, aka the Marshall Plan. US contributed $13 billion, which is now present day $175 billion, which, by the way, the American taxpayer must be paid back. Nobody's asking for that money back. But what they don't tell you is that Africa, through exploitation of its resources by the Europeans, was actually a much, much bigger contribution to the European recovery post-World War II. Nobody talks about that.
You know, when you hear lithium, you might think of electric cars, phone batteries, maybe even Mars rovers. But what most folks don't realize is that beneath the red dust of Africa, there's a silent shift happening, one that could cost America its place at the table. And for millions of Americans, that means the tech you depend on. The green future promises you bought into, maybe even national security, all of that is at stake. Imagine this, a continent awakening. Resourcic, no longer just exporting raw material for others to refine, but telling the world, we call the terms now. That continent is Africa, and the country scrambling to keep up. The US of A, hear us the truth, Africa holds a staggering share of the world as critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel, the kinds of elements that power electric vehicles, smartphones, the future of warfare. The US, meanwhile, is waking up to the fact that it's falling behind in the race. The race isn't just about mining. It's about who controls the supply chain, who gets the refining rights, who wins the geopolitical leverage. Let's zoom in. First, Africa's power move. Countries like Zimbabwe, Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, Ghana, Namibia aren't just sitting back. Zimbabwe alone is estimated to hold some of the largest lithium reserves in Africa. The DRC is host to enormous cobalt plus lithium potential. Meanwhile, many of these nations are starting to say, we will not just dig it up for you. We will build the refining plants, we will shape the deals, and the US. It's playing catch-up. Second, America's vulnerability. The US relies on secure access to these minerals not just for electric vehicles but for defense systems, for advanced electronics, for future tech. Yet the US is under serious pressure. Some reports say Africa holds about 30% of the world's critical mineral reserves, but the refining and value addition part, where the real money and leverage lie, is mostly elsewhere. Africa exports raw ore. Others refine it. That means Africa, for the first time, is in a position to demand more. America is losing both time and momentum. Third, the competition. It's not just the US versus Africa, it's the US versus China for Africa's minerals. China has surged ahead, snapping up mining deals, refining infrastructure, long-term contracts. Meanwhile, US diplomacy and investment are reacting, and reacting late is not a winning formula when the prize is something as crucial as lithium. Let's bring this closer to home. You in America, watching this on your phone, maybe driving an EV, maybe thinking about your job, retirement, national security, this matters. Because if the US fails to secure a reliable supply of these minerals, 1, it can drive up your costs. That lithium battery you hope to buy cheaper might cost more. 2, it could mean that China or other rivals gain the upper hand in tech or defense. That matters if you care about American competitiveness. Now, some specific examples. In 2023, Africa's lithium supply exploded. Countries like Zimbabwe ramped up exports fivefold, and African nations are putting export bans on raw materials to force refining to happen on the continent. That means fewer finished products coming to the US supply chain, more leverage in African hands, less margin for American competitors. The US announced that its lithium demand could go up 42 times over current levels. That's enormous. Think about your EV, think about every battery-powered device, the metals that go into. Those aren't replaceable with magic. So when Africa holds the keys or holds more of the keys, America is vulnerable. Here's the flip. Africa saying we'll only deal on our terms is a bold move. It's about sovereignty, yes. But for the US, it's about being locked out of value chains. Imagine you mined gold but never refined it, never minted the coins, never made the jewelry, you just sent raw gold away and someone else made the profit. That's what many African nations are rejecting now. The US, in many cases, is still used to being the one who sets the rules, especially in global trade and tech. But the rulebook is changing. The message to you: this isn't some faraway mining story, it's part of your future. Because if America doesn't secure these deals, doesn't step up to the new reality of Africa controlling more of its minerals, it risks becoming a spectator. And when you become a spectator in the race for critical resources, you start paying more, you lose innovation leadership, you lose bargaining power. So what happens next? Africa will continue to build its capacity. US companies and government will try to catch up, but momentum matters. Infrastructure, refining plants, local beneficiation, they all take time. When you're already behind, catching up becomes harder. Africa is moving fast, choosing partners, choosing terms. The US is learning a new lesson. You don't just buy raw mine. You must build relationships, value chains, local industries. You might ask, is this a threat or an opportunity? Good question, it's both. For the US, it's a warning sign. If America doesn't adjust, the cost could be higher technology prices, weaker supply chains, less strategic freedom. For Africa, it's a big opportunity to get fairness, to keep jobs, to shape the future. And for you, the American watching this, the better America adapts, the stronger your country stays, the better your tech stays affordable, the safer your economy stays. Let me leave you with this. The world changed. The old model was extract overseas, refine at home, dominate the market. The new model, global, local, value-added where the resource is. Africa's waking up to that. The US must wake up to, or watch someone else write the rules. So stay tuned, because in the next decade, what happens in Africa's mines and refineries will ripple through your life, your country, your wallet. And America? It has a choice: adapt and engage or walk behind and pay. While America scrambles to secure deals and shipments, Africa isn't just sitting still. Countries across the continent are making bold, unprecedented moves to control their own destiny. They are no longer just suppliers of raw minerals, they are becoming global players in the production chain, demanding that refining and processing happen on African soil. Take Zimbabwe and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These nations aren't just sitting on mountains of lithium and cobalt. They're actively investing in local refineries, forming partnerships with companies that are willing to respect their terms. They're saying, we're not giving away our future to foreign corporations anymore. This is more than a business decision, it's a political statement, and it's one that directly challenges Washington's old playbook, where the US often dictated terms to resource-rich nations. Meanwhile, US companies, accustomed to easy access to African minerals, are facing unexpected barriers. Governments are introducing export controls, higher taxes, and local content rules. Every deal now comes with strings attached for foreign companies, and the US finds itself negotiating on a level playing field it hasn't faced before. The days of just buying raw minerals at a low price are over, and the stakes aren't just financial. Lithium and cobalt are critical to the US energy transition. Electric vehicles, battery storage, smartphones, even defense technologies rely on these minerals. Without a steady, reliable supply, the American tech industry risks price spikes, production delays, and losing ground to competitors, particularly China and Europe, who have been quicker to secure long-term agreements. Africa's newfound leverage is also reshaping global alliances. Some nations are partnering with China, the EU, and private investors leveraging their resources to demand infrastructure development, jobs, and technology transfer. The message is clear. Africa is no longer willing to play the role of silent provider. It wants a seat at the table where global economic rules are set. For the average American watching this, the implications are closer than they think. The cost of batteries in your EV, the availability of smartphones, even the development of renewable energy projects depend on how effectively the US can adapt to Africa's rising power in the mineral market. If Africa continues to set the terms, the US will not just lose economic advantage, it could lose its strategic edge in key technologies. In short, Africa is rewriting the rules of the game. It's no longer a continent to be negotiated with on Washington's terms, it is a force that demands respect, fairness, and recognition. And as the world watches this silent battle unfold, one thing is certain. The outcome will shape not just the global economy, but the technological and strategic future of the United States itself. While the headlines talk about rising lithium prices and global tech competition, what often gets missed is the silent revolution happening across Africa, a revolution that is quietly shifting the balance of power in the world as mineral markets. The truth is, Africa is no longer the passive supplier of raw materials that the world has relied on for decades. It is asserting itself, and in doing so, it is directly challenging the United States, a country that has long assumed dominance over global supply chains. Let's start with Zimbabwe. This country, often overshadowed in the international news cycle, holds one of the largest lithium reserves on the planet. Lithium, as you know, is the backbone of the electric vehicle revolution and a critical component in energy storage technology. In the past, companies from the US and other Western nations could rely on easy access to these minerals. Today, Zimbabwe is rewriting the rules. The government has introduced policies that require foreign companies to process lithium locally, build refineries on Zimbabwean soil, and invest in local infrastructure. This is not just a business strategy, it's a declaration of economic sovereignty. The days when American corporations could come in, extract resources, and leave with enormous profits without benefiting local communities are over. Zimbabwe is taking control, and this control is creating headaches in Washington. Then there's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The DRC has been the world's primary source of cobalt, another essential mineral for batteries and tech devices. But even the Congo is evolving. The government has started demanding stricter terms on foreign mining contracts, pushing for higher royalties, local beneficiation, and more technology transfer. The US, which has historically relied on predictable access to these critical minerals, is suddenly facing a continent setting the terms. Not the other way around. This reversal is sending shockwaves through American policymakers and business leaders who are realizing they can no longer take Africa's resources for granted. Africa's rise in the mineral sector is not limited to Zimbabwe or the Dar Sea. Countries like Ghana, Namibia, and Botswana are entering the global lithium and cobalt markets with increasing sophistication. They are forming strategic partnerships with international companies, not merely as suppliers but as equal stakeholders in the refining and distribution process. In practice, this means that Africa is no longer just a source of raw minerals. It is becoming a full-fledged participant in the value chain, controlling extraction, refinement, and export. And for the US, this is a new reality. The old model by raw minerals cheaply, refine elsewhere, dominate the market is rapidly collapsing. The stakes are enormous. Lithium and cobalt are not just commodities. They are the lifeblood of modern technology. Electric vehicles, smartphones, renewable energy storage, and even military hardware rely on these resources. Without a reliable supply, the US risks production delays, rising costs, and technological stagnation. And the more Africa asserts control over its minerals, the less leverage the US has to secure favorable deals. America's reliance on these minerals means that the shifts in African policy directly impact everyday life. The price of electric cars, the availability of lithium-ion batteries, and even national security are all tied to how effectively the US can respond to Africa's rise. To understand the scale, consider this. Africa holds roughly 30% of the world's known reserves of critical minerals. Yet for decades, much of the continent's value was exported as raw ore, with refining done elsewhere, mostly in Asia or Europe. Now, African nations are insisting that they receive a fair share of the value. They are investing in local processing facilities, demanding joint ventures that benefit local economies, and even limiting exports of raw minerals until certain conditions are met. This is strategic, deliberate, and highly effective by controlling more of the processing and refining stages. Africa is no longer dependent on the US, and the US is no longer in full control. China has been quick to recognize this shift. Beijing has poured billions into African mining operations, securing long-term contracts that give Chinese companies both access and influence. Europe is following a similar approach. Meanwhile, US efforts are reactive. The American government and corporations are attempting to catch up, but they face a hard truth. In Africa, they are no longer the only player at the table. The continent is negotiating with multiple global powers, and the US must compete not just on price but on terms, partnership, and political influence. The rules have changed, and the US is realizing it is playing catch-up in a game it once dominated. For Americans watching this, the implications are closer to home than they might realize. Every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every battery storage system depends on a steady supply of lithium, cobalt, and other minerals. If Africa continues to tighten control, dictate terms, and prioritize local beneficiation, it could lead to higher costs, supply chain disruptions, and increased reliance on competitors like China for processed materials. This isn't a distant problem. It's a strategic and economic challenge that affects consumers, companies, and national security alike. The political dimension is equally important. Africa's approach is not merely economic. It's also a statement of sovereignty and independence. After decades of being influenced by foreign powers, African nations are now asserting their rights over their natural resources. They are aware of their geopolitical leverage and are using it to extract not just economic gains but also infrastructure investment, technology transfer, and partnerships that strengthen local economies. The United States, which is accustomed to setting terms, finds itself in a delicate position. Push too hard and you risk alienating the very governments you need. Move too slowly and competitors like China secure long-term dominance. And there's another layer to consider: environmental and social responsibility. African nations are increasingly insisting that foreign companies comply with local labor laws, environmental regulations, and community development programs. This adds complexity to U.S. companies' operations, but it also reflects a global shift toward ethical and sustainable resource management. Companies and governments that ignore these trends risk not just losing influence but also facing reputational damage back home. America can no longer rely solely on economic might. It must also adapt to these evolving expectations. Meanwhile, African nations are leveraging their rising influence in minerals to strengthen continental and regional alliances. Through organizations like the African Union and regional economic communities, they are coordinating policies, sharing best practices, and collectively negotiating with foreign powers. This united front makes it even harder for the U.S. to secure one-off deals that favor only American interests. Africa is not just controlling its resources, it is shaping global negotiation dynamics. For Americans, the takeaway is clear. The battle over Africa's minerals is more than a distant geopolitical story. It is a strategic, economic, and technological challenge that will affect industries, jobs, and everyday life. Every decision made in African boardrooms and governments today will ripple across global markets, impacting the availability and cost of critical technology tomorrow. The United States can no longer assume dominance. It must engage, adapt, and innovate in response to Africa's rise. The continent is proving that it is not just a supplier of raw materials, but a major player in shaping the future of global technology and power. In this evolving landscape, the United States faces a crucial choice. It can either step up its strategy investing in African infrastructure, forging equitable partnerships, and embracing local processing, or it can continue to react slowly, risking both economic and strategic disadvantage. Africa's minerals are no longer just resources. They are tools of influence, leverage, and sovereignty. And as Africa strengthens its position, the U.S. must recognize that the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. The outcome of this battle will shape not just the global tech market, but the future of American competitiveness in an increasingly multipolar world. As we've seen, the story of Africa's lithium and critical minerals is not just a distant economic headline, it is a wake-up call for the United States and the world. Africa is no longer content to sit quietly as a supplier of raw materials. The continent is asserting control over its resources, building refineries, demanding fair deals, and leveraging its strategic minerals to influence the global market. And in doing so, it's sending a clear message to the U.S. The old rules no longer apply. For America, this is a turning point. The minerals that power your electric cars, your smartphones, and your renewable energy systems are increasingly under Africa's control. The more African nations refine their resources locally, set terms, and build partnerships beyond the U.S., the more Washington is forced to adapt, negotiate, and rethink its strategy. This is not just about economics. It's about technology, national security, and global influence. If America doesn't move fast, it risks being left behind in a rapidly changing world. But this story is bigger than just the U.S., it's about Africa claiming its place on the global stage. It's about nations saying, we will no longer be silent participants in our own destiny. By investing in infrastructure, enforcing fair contracts, and demanding local beneficiation, African countries are showing the world that they can compete, negotiate, and lead. The continent's minerals are not just a source of wealth, they are a tool for empowerment, independence, and long-term growth. For the everyday American watching the implications are real. Higher costs for batteries, potential delays in technology, and shifts in global supply chains could all touch your life sooner than you think. But beyond that, there's a lesson in strategy. When a continent awakens to its power, it reshapes the rules for everyone else. And for America, the choice is clear: engage fairly, invest smartly, and build genuine partnerships, or risk losing influence to other global powers who are already seizing the opportunity. Africa is not waiting. It is acting decisively, building capacity, and shaping the future of the global mineral market. The U.S. can either rise to the challenge or be left behind as Africa sets the terms. This isn't speculation, this is happening now, and the ripple effects will be felt for decades. So the next time you hear about lithium, cobalt, or other critical minerals, remember this story. It's not just about resources, it's about power, influence, and who gets to shape the future. Africa is making its move, and the world is watching. The question now is simple. Will America adapt and secure its place, or will it watch as another power rises where it once dominated? One thing is certain, the battle for Africa's minerals is far from over, but the rules have already changed. And for anyone invested in the future, whether in technology, business, or national security, this is a story you cannot afford to ignore.